Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time around, we're tackling something that I think a lot of us can relate to, that feeling of, ugh, am I doing this whole life thing right? Like there's this invisible rule book we're all supposed to be following.
Oh, absolutely. That pressure to hit certain milestones by a certain age, get the corner office by 30, be married with 2.5 kids by 35. It's everywhere you look.
Right. And you're looking at your life like, wait, who made the rules? This isn't even what I want. And that's exactly why this deep dive is so fascinating. We've got a stack of articles about people who basically said, nope, not playing by those rules anymore. And they went on to build incredible lives, totally on their own terms.
And it's not just about rejecting societal norms for the sake of it. It's about understanding where those expectations come from and then consciously choosing to define success on your own terms.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. First up, where do these expectations even come from? Why do we feel so pressured to hit certain milestones by a certain age?
Well, a lot of it is rooted in history, believe it or not. Think about agrarian societies,
Hmm,
where life was centered around the land. You became an adult, you got married, you started working the family farm. There is a very clear, practical timeline for those milestones.
makes sense. So what changed? Why doesn't that work so well anymore?
The Industrial Revolution happened. We went from fields to factories, and suddenly the focus shifted to education, career, financial stability. It's a different game, but that underlying pressure to conform, to follow a predetermined path, it kind of stuck around.
Right, and it's not just the historical context either, right?
Yeah.
It's our families, our culture.
Huge influence. I mean, parents naturally want the best for their kids,
Yeah.
but sometimes that translates into don't make the same mistakes I did, or you have to be a doctor, projecting their own hopes and fears.
Totally. And then we layer on the media, social media especially, with everyone's perfectly curated highlight reels. It's a recipe for feeling like we're constantly falling behind.
It's so easy to get caught up in those comparisons, but we have to remember, it's just a snapshot, not the whole story.
So how do we cut through the noise? The people we're talking about today, the ones who rewrote the rules, what are they doing differently?
They're listening to their own internal compass, even when it leads them off the beaten path. Take the guy who left his secure job as a PE teacher to become a social media influencer.
I remember reading about him. That took some serious guts. What made him make such a drastic change?
He wasn't unhappy with his job, but he felt this pull towards something more. He wanted to, and I'm quoting him here, ignite creativity in a different way.
I love that. So it wasn't about dissatisfaction. It was more about tapping into a different side of himself. What was scarier for him, leaving a stable job or dealing with people who probably thought he was crazy?
It was both, honestly. He talked about battling self-doubt, financial worries, judgment from people he was close to, but ultimately he dove headfirst into his passion, found mentors, put in the work.
And now he has millions of followers and a thriving business doing what he loves. Proof that sometimes taking that leap of faith pays off. Okay, what about the telemarketer who became a funeral director and then an entrepreneur? Talk about a winding career path.
It definitely throws the whole 5-year plan concept out the window, but when you look closer, there's this beautiful thread of empathy and compassion that runs through her story.
I was so fascinated by that. It's like she was drawn to helping others, no matter what the setting was. She just kept following that inner compass, even when it led her to the most unexpected places. It really makes you think, like we all have these nudges, these whispers inside us, urging us towards something different. But how do we learn to actually listen to that inner voice, especially when it's telling us to do something totally unexpected?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? It's easy to admire these people from a distance, but actually stepping outside our own comfort zones, that takes courage. But the good news is we don't have to figure it all out on our own. The articles you shared actually offer some really practical advice.
Okay, lay it on me. What kind of advice?
Well, a lot of it boils down to asking yourself some tough questions, the kind that really make you examine what you want out of life.
Like, we're not talking about what's for dinner.
Yeah.
Questions here. We're going deep.
Exactly. One article talks about this guy who survived a near-fatal car accident. Talk about a wake-up call.
Yeah, that'll definitely make you reevaluate things.
Totally. And for him, it forced him to ask himself some big questions like, am I living a life that's true to myself? Am I making a difference? Have I truly loved and been loved?
Wow. Yeah, those are the kind of questions that stay with you.
Right. And those questions became his guideposts. He realized he wasn't passionate about his corporate job anymore. He felt called to do something that felt more meaningful, so he quit his job and started a company focused on a social cause he really cared about.
He turned a tragedy into this incredible catalyst for change. It's amazing. And it's not just about figuring out what we want to do, it's also about who we want to be, right? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of person do we want to show up as in the world?
100%. And one thing that came up again and again in these stories is the importance of vulnerability.
Okay, that seems a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? Aren't they supposed to be confident, have it all together?
We are in many ways. But there's this idea that in order to be vulnerable, we have to be weak, and that's just not true. There's this great story about a woman who wrote a letter to her ex after a bad breakup.
Oh, I think I remember that one. Was that the one where she really let him have it?
It was. She held nothing back. She later said it was the most terrifying, but also the most freeing thing she'd ever done.
Why do you think that was? What was it about that experience that was so powerful for her?
I think it allowed her to reclaim her story. Instead of letting the breakup define her, she took control of the narrative. She was honest with herself about how she felt, and that allowed her to move on in a healthier way.
It's like that saying, feel your feelings so you can let them go.
Exactly. And that idea of vulnerability, it applies to so many areas of life, right? How often do we hold back in our work, our relationships, our creativity, because we're afraid to fail, to be judged?
All the time. It's
Yeah.
like we're so afraid of getting it wrong that we don't even try.
Which is a shame because some of the most incredible breakthroughs happen when we're willing to step outside our comfort zones to embrace that I don't have all the answers energy.
So I've got asking tough questions, embracing vulnerability. Is there anything else these rule breakers can teach us? What about the role of, say, our support system? Because it's easy to get caught up in this I've got to do it all myself mentality.
Oh, absolutely. That DIY life mentality is a trap. These stories really highlight the importance of community, of having people in your corner who believe in you, even when you doubt yourself.
It's like we all need those cheerleaders, those people who remind us of our own awesomeness when we've temporarily forgotten.
It's huge. And on the flip side, feeling isolated or unsupported, that can be a huge barrier to going after what we truly want. It was really striking how many of these rule breakers talked about the role of mentors, friends,
It's
family.
like that African proverb, it takes a village.
Right. We need those people who get us, who challenge us, who celebrate our wins and help us dust ourselves off when we stumble. Speaking of support systems, I keep thinking about Petty Officer Mike Mansour's story.
His story just really stayed with me. It makes you realize how precious life is and how interconnected we all are. And it makes you think about the kind of legacy you want to leave behind, you know? Like it's not just about the big splashy things, it's about those everyday moments of connection, of courage, of just showing up for each other.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? And it kind of brings us back to this big question we keep circling around. How do we define success? If it's not the fancy job title or the perfect family by a certain age, then what is it? What does a truly fulfilling life look like?
It's like we're finally tossing out that old rule book, but now we're staring at a blank page. Like, okay, so what do I actually want to write?
It can definitely feel daunting, but also incredibly liberating, right?
Yeah.
Because the answer is it's completely up to you. Your version of success doesn't have to look anything like anyone else's.
So it really comes down to tuning out all the external noise and listening to that inner voice, figuring out what truly resonates with you.
Exactly. Maybe it's about finding work that lights you up every single day. Or maybe it's about prioritizing your family, your creative passions, traveling the world. The beauty of it is you get to decide.
It's about giving ourselves permission to redefine what matters most, to write our own definition of success. And the coolest part, it's not a one-and-done kind of thing. It's a journey. And it's okay if that path zigs and zags along the way.
Absolutely. Even those rule breakers we've been talking about, the ones who seem like they have it all figured out, I guarantee you their paths weren't always linear and predictable.
Well, for sure. I bet they have moments of doubt, setbacks, maybe even a few faceplants along the way.
Absolutely. But they also demonstrated this incredible resilience. They kept getting back up, dusting themselves off, and adjusting their course as they went. And that's something we can all learn from.
Yeah, it's that whole fall down 7 times, stand up 8 mentality.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to have it all figured out to take that first step. Just start by asking yourself some simple questions like, what's one small thing I can do today that feels more aligned with who I want to be?
Love that. It's those tiny shifts, those micro rebellions against the expectations that don't serve us that can lead to the biggest transformations.
It really is amazing what can happen when you start making choices from a place of authenticity, even if those choices seem small at first.
So to everyone listening who's feeling stuck or lost or like they missed their supposed to moment, take a deep breath. It's never too late to hit the reset button and start living a life that feels true to you.
Right. Imagine this. If all those societal expectations vanished overnight, what would your ideal life look like?
That's the question I want you to hold on to this week. What would you do with that blank page? The world needs your unique gifts, your story. So go out there and write it. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep defining success on your own terms.